This is Dr. Edith Ubuntu Chan. Welcome to the Dr. E Show, a show exploring the frontiers of our human possibilities in areas like health and wellness, science and spirituality, quantum biology, and conscious living, so that together we can awaken the best of ourselves and create our most joyful and fulfilling lives. My guest today is internationally renowned documentary filmmaker Peter-Arthur Straubinger. His film, In the Beginning There Was Light, was one of the most successful and popular documentary films in the history of Austrian cinema. It explores the strange and controversial topic of breatharianism, this idea that some human beings, under certain circumstances, may be able to live on little or no physical food. They claim to live directly on light, chi, or prana. Full disclaimer, this interview and his film is not here to recommend that anybody stop eating. Instead, it blows our minds open to new levels of possibilities in quantum biology and the interaction between consciousness and our 3D material world. Beyond his life as a filmmaker and highly sought-after presenter, Peter is also a longtime media and radio personality with the single most popular radio show in Austria, which attracts 3 million listeners weekly. He's an eloquent, fun, and engaging speaker, a loving husband and father to 2 very, very sweet boys, and one of my favorite people in the whole wide world. Please help me in welcoming the director of the multi-award-winning documentary film, In the Beginning There Was Light. Welcome, Peter. Thank you for making time for this interview.
Thank you very much, Edith. It's always a pleasure to be with you, and especially on your show today. I'm really looking forward to what we will talk about.
Thank you. So for those of us that haven't watched your film, can you start from the beginning for us? How did you even become interested in such a strange and niche topic as breatharianism?
Yeah, it's really strange. And I understand everybody who says, wow, wait a moment, because it was for me the same, but it was a very, very long journey for me. So what's in my film in 90 minutes, it happened in my real life over a time of 20, 25 years. So I'm now 47, and until my early 20s, I really was very conventional when it comes to my worldview and how our bodies work and how biology works and all that stuff. So I really was in this materialistic bubble, and I had everything sorted out or thought how everything works. But I always have been interested in psychology, and from Sigmund Freud, I moved to C.G. Jung and transpersonal psychology, and I read a lot of books about it, and I heard about meditation, and this was a really thick book about transpersonal psychology, and they from different traditions they were looking at meditation, and it really sounded interesting to me, but I had no idea at all how this should work. And it was a long journey for me. It needed a few years reading books and meeting different people, and in the year 2000, in spring 2000, I met this meditation teacher where some of his students told me, do you know that this guy doesn't eat? And I asked him, and he told me, yes, I do not eat, and I made this strange process, and it's now more than
21-day process.
The 21-day process. It's also featured in my film. Please don't try it yourself. It can be really dangerous. But this guy, he told me that he did this, and I heard. I saw a few years before, I saw a documentary about the Swiss national saint, Nicholas of Flüe. He lived many hundred years ago, and it is said that he didn't eat and drink for the last 20 years of his life. But I thought this is a Catholic myth, and you cannot take this seriously. And now there was a real person telling me that he didn't eat for more than a year, and he looked very healthy. And it didn't sound like a lie to me, but on the other hand, of course, I thought, how should this work? And there are theories in biology and medicine explaining us why this cannot be.
Mm.
So this tension between heart and head created a deep interest. And so I started to do a private investigation first. I read a lot of books, and I visited forums on the internet, and it became more and more interesting. Also because I saw that this strange phenomenon of breatharianism, how it is called in the West or in the United States, isn't just an invention of esoteric circles in the 90s. It's known throughout all traditions. It's known in China, in India, in Christian tradition. There are actually quite a lot of saints who stopped eating. And I also saw, of course, that there are a lot of people starving to death every day, and also there were a tragic death of people who did this 21-day process. So I saw that on the internet and in books, I can prove myself anything. And this was like the start for my personal journey with this film, because I wanted to get firsthand information, and I traveled the world. I traveled to India, to China, to Russia, and I wanted to see what's happening there. And yeah, perhaps we can speak later on about these stories that happened.
Yeah, I also heard about breatharianism through my study of Qigong, this Bigu phenomena. And then I started researching also myself and found some people who did have wonderful experiences with the 21-day process. And they found it very deeply healing and transformative also. And I saw the controversy around it. So yeah, it's very confusing. What is the truth? And if we don't need to eat, why are there starving people in the world? And all these questions, I have the same. So what did you discover? This is blowing, I think, all of our audience's minds right now. This very confusing, right? Because it's blowing our whole reality apart, if this is possible.
What I did discover, and this is now the thing I always say about my film, the film, of course, is on the surface about these strange people, that perhaps there are a few people on the world who do not need to eat. But the really important thing is to understand that we are all living on light. But what does this mean? Because this creates so much controversy, and it's creates so much confusion. Because what I mean and what I found out is that our classic caloric theory isn't complete. It's just a part of the whole story. And classical caloric theory was invented in the 18th century. In 1777, the father of modern chemistry, Antoine Lavoisier, had this idea that the processes in combustion engines are more or less the same as the processes, the metabolic processes in living beings. And so you have fuel, you have oxygen, and you create energy and waste products. And this is still the idea we have in mind when we talk about food. And of course, there is some truth to it, but it's not the complete truth. And already in the 1970s, they found out that there are big differences how much food people need. And it was in 1973 that Nature, the best renowned scientific journal in the world, published an article, How Much Food Does Man Require? And the bottom line is, we don't know, because it differs from person to person, from situation to situation completely. And then this article, they already write that in some parts of the world, there are people where it's impossible to explain their survival by caloric measures, because they eat so little. This was already published in 1973,
Wow.
but it's still not in the mainstream, in the collective consciousness, because this idea that we are just biological combustion engines is so strong, and it needed more than 100 years, because it was in the end of the 19th century when there was this scientific, that they found the scientific evidence that this is true. But they had very old machines by then, and it was just a statistical middle thing, and the caloric theory fits to most people more or less. To nobody completely, but more or less. But it's like a Gaussian curve. The further you go out, the less it fits. And the caloric theory is like when like you would weigh your body, and how do you call this machine that weighs your body?
The scale?
Yeah, the scale. Like a scale that says, a man with your age and your height weighs 75 kilos. And of course, more or less, if I have 73 kilos, so more or less it fits, but I could weigh 120 kilos or 45 kilos. And there are people with my height and my age who weigh a lot more and a lot less. So it's completely unscientific. And everybody who deals with caloric theory knows this, because it's just not fitting to everybody. And so it needed many decades that there were 4 scientific institutes then who dared to ask this heretic question: how much food does man require? And to dare to give the answer, we do not know. It needed another 10 years that Dr. Paul Webb, he worked for the NASA, and he completely measured the human energy balance. And he published an article in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, where he showed that in completely normal people, up to 25% of the energy you cannot explain calorically. So like a quarter of the energy in completely normal people comes out of nowhere. They called it unmeasured energy. And like you told, in the Chinese medicine or in the Eastern medical traditions, they know this. They say the life energy, the chi, how they call it in China, or prana in India, comes into the body indirectly via food and via breathing. But there is also a part of chi or prana that comes into the body not calorically. And this is, now you mentioned bigu. Bigu means without bread. That's like the Chinese name for breatharianism. Bigu means without bread, and the full,
or without grains.
Without grains.
Yeah.
And the full name is Bigu Fuji. So without grains, but just through chi. And people who live in this state of Bigu, they get the chi, the life energy, just directly. Of course, we do not know how far this goes from a scientific point of view, but what I learned first, and this is what I want to tell, we all live on Bigu to a certain point. We all live on light. We are all breatharians to a certain degree. And this differs a lot. So in the studies from Dr. Paul Webb, it was in completely normal people between 3 and 25% that was not explainable calorically. And now we are not speaking about breatharianism. In breatharians, this unmeasured energy, or however we may call it, direct chi, direct prana, or whatever, is just bigger. It's 30%, 40%, 50%, 60%, 80%, 90%. If there is 100%, I don't know. It's just impossible to say this from a scientific point of view. But what I found out in my journey, in my research journey, is that there are scientific studies who give us very interesting evidence, like the case of Prahladiani, this Indian yogi who claims that he did not eat and drink for more than 70 years, and he was studied twice in a hospital in India. There was supervision by the Indian military, and they found out that he was able to survive with stable blood counts for 10, and in the second study for 15 days without eating. That's not too difficult. We all can do this, but without drinking. And now the really interesting part is without urinating, because when you don't drink and you don't urinate, then it's said normally that after 3, 4, 5 days, the uremic waste products in your blood are so high that you die because of self-intoxication. And this guy lived for 15 days with stable blood counts. So we see there is something interesting to it. And there is another study with Hiratan Manek. He was studied for 410 days with drinking water, but without eating. And he lost 19 kilos. I don't know how much this is in pounds, but you know, it's
quite a
not,
bit.
Yeah, it's quite a bit, but it's not much if you don't eat for 410 days.
He did not die, is the point.
Yeah.
He's still alive, vibrant, and healthy, right? All of his measurements looked healthy.
So perhaps in this case of Hiratan Manek, he has a direct chi percentage of, I don't know, 95%, 90%, I don't know. And what we have to see in addition is that, and now it's getting complicated, because the surroundings, we are nourished by our surroundings. It's not like these people are completely isolated and eat nothing, but there are ways how we are nourished by our surroundings. And for example, it's healthier to be in nature than to be in a concrete room with air from the air condition. And we will elaborate on that later, I think, when we speak about Professor Pollack. But it's different from situation to situation, from person to person. And what I found out is that we are all living on light to a certain percentage. And we are all capable of increasing our direct chi. And that's the reason why, for example, in fasting, when you do fasting in the first days, you lose your weight quite rapidly, and then you lose less and less, and the curve is not so steep anymore. And probably we will also speak about that, how healthy fasting is, and we don't have to have this fear that we will die because our fuel is running out. Because we already, when I was a kid, I always got these sugar pills from my grandmother, because she said, you need energy, you need energy, you need energy. And this is this thinking from the 70s and from the 80s, that we are these little combustion engines, and you have to put fuel all the time in the human body to get energy. And today, since the Nobel Prize 2016, we finally know that there is this phenomenon of autophagy, I think you call it also in English, that is created when we do not eat, when we get in a fasting mode. And autophagy is the best anti-aging thing you can do for your body. It's the best medicine. Nowadays, they know it's good to heal cancer. It's good to heal infections. It's good to prevent Alzheimer. It's good for your cells to make you younger. And so we see that, because when I made interviews in the year 2005 and 2006, a lot of doctors still said fasting is completely nonsense. You know, it's this esoteric craziness, and it helps nothing. And this was really something medics were convinced. And 10 years later, now we finally know, you know, it's a really good thing. You know, not fasting for 410 days, but nowadays we know you need at least 14 hours a day where you do not eat, where you just drink water or tea, and then you create this process of autophagy, and that's the best thing you can do for your body. And what I also want to communicate, what a lot of people, of course, do, is intermittent fasting. You know, I do this every day now for quite a long time, this 16-8 process. So you 16 hours a day eating nothing at all, and in the rest you can eat whatever you want, and it's the best thing you can do for your body.
Yeah, and they found it's not, so it's interesting because we used to think fasting, you're depriving yourself, but actually you gain a lot in the process of just limiting your eating time window and possibly the dose of your food. And that creates actually a lot of benefits, and including building muscles. A lot of my clients and patients are worried about fasting because they think they'll waste away. It turns out that intermittent fasting can enhance your muscle building capacity also. So it's very interesting area of study.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and it's so important that this knowledge gets out, because in my film you also see this long-term study with monkeys with calorie restriction, and it was published in 2008 at the University of Wisconsin. And you see one monkey who was nourished calorie restricted, and the other monkey normally. And just by looking at these two monkeys, you see how healthy the calorie restricted monkey is, and the other one is sitting there, and the hair is falling out, and he has diabetes, and nearly no muscles, and he's really sick. He looks like old people are supposed to look like.
So is aging an overeating disease, in your opinion?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Overeating is really probably one of the worst things we can do to our health, because I always say the big misunderstanding we had, and this is coming from the age of enlightenment, and this idea from Antoine Lavoisier that we are just combustion engines, that our bodies are machines. And you know, when you have a machine, you put fuel in it, and as long it has fuel, it's running and running and running, and yeah, then some parts are getting destroyed and then not. But a machine can run and run and run. But the big difference is that we are living beings. We are made out of billions and trillions of living cells, and every cell is a living being. And the big difference between machines and living beings is that we live in cycles. We are awake, and then we have to sleep. We are awake and we have to sleep. And we need food, and then we have to digest it. We have to clean up again. So these cycles are important. And medicine didn't see these cycles. So in the past, there was this ideology that you have to eat a little but the whole day. And finally we know, no, that's wrong. It's completely wrong, because our cells need this time where they don't get any food at all, so they can clean up, they can recycle, they can put out trash. And so yeah, there is a lot of knowledge that has to get out to understand that we are a lot healthier if we eat less. And the other thing I always try to communicate is that all the things we eat in the West, and these amounts, and what we eat, fat, these fat and sweet
Protein,
things,
yeah,
we eat for our emotional body. Our physical body would be happier with a lot less and different things. Now, it's still okay to eat for our emotional body, but it helps to understand first that it's like a drug. It's easier to understand it with cigarettes. With cigarettes, everybody knows it. People know that's dangerous for your health, but you do it because you are addicted and you are pushing your emotional body. And but it's funny, in the 1920s, in my talks, I always show these advertisements for cigarettes where they had health cigarettes, and they really advertised smoking as healthy for your nerves. It's good against overweight. It's good for asthma and so on. And it was later on that they said, okay, smoking isn't perhaps not good for your health, but it's not dangerous. Don't worry. In the 1960s, for example, there was a big cover in a big German newspaper where they asked in big letters, is smoking bad for your health? And you have to think now, 40 years later, where, I mean, this is no discussion. Everybody knows, every child knows that smoking is bad for your health. And the same happens now with sugar. In the 1970s, I think he was called John Chapkin. He wrote this book, Pure, White and Deadly, where he said that if just a small fraction of the negative effects of sugar in the food industry would be known, food as a supplement for the food industry would be forbidden immediately. And the sugar lobby destroyed his reputation. He died in the 90s with destroyed reputation, no money. And finally, it starts now, in the last 5 or 10 years, all these books are coming up, that sugar film, and
yes,
we have a lot of, so this knowledge is coming out, but it's more or less the same what happened with the tobacco industry is happening now with sugar. Because
I want to pause you for a second, because before, when you said we're just getting to know that eating is mostly for our emotional body and that we have to look at food like a drug. But isn't some food actually necessary for physical energy? Not all of us are yogis or qigong masters that have cultivated ourselves, and we actually physically need that energy. I'd like to clarify that so that we don't start blaming all of us as emotional eating addicts, right?
Absolutely. But what I wanted to say is that our physical body wants different things than our emotional body normally. Because when I eat chocolate and sugar and fat, my physical body isn't very happy about that, because it's like with cocaine and the coca leaf. When the coca leaf isn't that bad, but if you take cocaine all the time, it's not good for you. And it's with sugar the same. This concentrated sugar isn't good for us. And in that sugar film, they brought this example with the Aborigines, that the sugar that is in one can of Coca-Cola, the Aborigines in former times ate in 1 year. So if they drink one can of Coca-Cola, the sugar of 1 year gets into the body, and of course it creates huge problems.
Yeah.
And the number one reason why people are dying, what's the name, the problems with the heart and with your
Cardiovascular disease, heart disease. Yeah.
That's the number one reason why people die on this planet. And the sugar industry was very clever in blaming fat for it in the 40s. So they bought their own scientists and published the right studies and so on. So fat was the bad guy. And sugar, like I told, in the 1970s, everybody knew if you get sugar, it's good for you, it's healthy, take some sugar. And in my tea, my grandmother put sugar in, and no problem.
Yeah.
And it turns out that it's really the most dangerous drug, because the effects of sugar are so underestimated. And you know that you see in that sugar film, if anybody wants to see to watch it, you see that the same regions in your brain are activated like with opium. And you really get addicted to it. So what I wanted to say is that our physical body is happy with different things, and our emotional body uses often food as a drug, and this gets mixed up. And so
this is interesting, because in my book, did you get to the part of my book where I talk about the crowding out method?
Yeah. I like that a lot.
So that's, I think, some of what's happening with the breatharians is that they are conscious of how to nourish themselves with all the non-physical things that nourish us. The sunlight, the time in nature, the physical contact with nature, the exposure to darkness at night. We're starting, even very conventional medicine is understanding that our metabolic rate and our sensation of satiation and fullness, like hormones like leptin, our serotonin, our melatonin, all of these things are tied to our metabolism and our cravings for food. Right? So I think the breatharians may just be at the very cutting edge of that possibility of really maximizing our capacity to tap into all those streams of nourishments to optimize our physiology, so that we need the most minimal amount of physical nourishment to feed our body, to feed our emotions, and so on, because they're tapped into an alternative way of nourishing ourselves that actually, once we point this out, everybody knows this. During summertime, you see more sunshine, you're less hungry.
Absolutely.
If you're sleep deprived, you wake up, you're craving all kinds of sugar and fats because you pulled an all-nighter, meeting a deadline, you're very hungry the next day. Like, everybody has had that experience. And I think I love what you said about looking at us as really a spectrum of possibilities. It's not black and white, like, you're a breatharian, you're a food eater. It's not like two boxes. It's a whole spectrum that we are always back and forth with.
And that's the dangerous thing when you speak about breatharianism, that people just have this black and white thinking. That you have people who need 3,000 calories a day and 3 meals a day and snacks in between and so on, and then you have breatharianism and they don't eat at all. No, there are thousands of shades of gray and colors, and the important thing is to understand this thing about the emotional body, that feeding the emotional body can help us to feed the physical body in a more healthy way. Because like you said, of course, in a normal life, we need, of course, this life energy that is stored in the food, and we can harvest this life energy that is stored in the food. And all these tips, what is healthy and not, of course, that's all true. But it's also important to understand that we are human beings who have emotional problems, and we need chocolate, and we need that and that and that. And sorting this out is very important, I think, because people say, okay, I need to eat a Snickers or a chocolate bar because I need energy. That's the normal explanation. No, that's not energy. That's costing a lot, actually quite a lot of energy for the body, but it's feeding the emotional bodies. You know, where as soon the sugar comes, wow, the dopamine and the serotonin, and it's happening up there, and you have more energy. And what you mentioned, that these breatharians obviously have fixed their emotional bodies, seems to be true. And it turns out that it seems to be quite difficult to mix a breatharian lifestyle with a stressful lifestyle. And that's also something you experience when you do fasting. And when I did fasting, when I do long-term fasting, not this intermittent fasting, but long-term fasting, then it's really hard to combine this with a stressful lifestyle. Then you have to do this in holidays, or at least I have to do this in holidays, because then I have time to relax. I can go to nature, and my emotional body is quite stable, and then I'm able to tap into these other forms of nourishment. But
yeah, one of the things that a theme that we visit in my work and my book also is this idea that what our society calls normal is normal to be chronically stressed out, chronically unhealthy, chronically anxious, overweight, a little bit sick. That's normal in our society. So all the scientific studies of studying, you talked about the Gaussian curve and exploring the outliers versus the mean or median.
Exactly, yeah.
Right. So we have fixed our ideology of how biology and physiology work on what that standard norm is. And then we forgot about the huge possibilities on the other sides of that.
Exactly. And this normal thing, it said, it has to be this way. It cannot be different because science says this is normal. But no, we can shift this actually. And this is the interesting thing, that we can shift this. And why is it normal? It has to do with this machine-like thinking, because in the age of enlightenment, René Descartes, the founding father of enlightenment, he had this vision. And I don't want to bash René Descartes, because he was a great thinker, and he's the founding father of modern science, and I like the scientific method. So don't get me wrong. I think the scientific method is great. It's just a problem if you make a religion out of it, and that's happening because this ideology of the age of enlightenment was that nature works mechanistically. And they had this idea that all bodies are more or less machines, and that there is this picture of the digesting duck where you see how the ducks work inside, and they really thought they can build a duck and they can build a human body one day. But it turns out that's complete nonsense. They cannot produce one single living cell out of dead matter, because life energy is still the biggest mystery. But our whole society is now built on this idea that living beings are machines, and we have to work like machines. And if a part is broken, you have to fix it, and you have to put a new thing into it. But we forgot that we are not machines. We are living beings, and we work completely different. And this fits in every part of society. Like in schools, our schools are made like
factory machine worker, conveyor belt system.
Exactly,
Yes.
exactly. And
Yes.
this fits in every part of our life, and we have to change this. And I think there is a big possibility, because a lot of people always say, oh, artificial intelligence and robotic, and that's so dangerous. No, this can be an important part of creating paradise on earth, because all these machine-like works and things can be done by machines, and we finally can be the divine living human beings that we are. Of course, we have now to change the financial system and the economic system and everything, because this is also 300 years old. And but there is this possibility, and if we understand this wonder of life, and my film, as I said, is not about eating or not eating. It's about this respect, this wonder of life, this wonder of life energy. If we understand that we are wonders, we don't need to do telepathy and I don't and create wonders. We are wonders already. That's the real good news in my film.
So what are, in your research over so many decades, what are those simple things that we can all do to attune ourselves so that our emotional body is more healthy, so that we are more, really, we're talking about more optimal efficiency, the human being working properly again, in harmony with nature, surrounding ourselves in the right environment where our physiology is at its top performance and top efficiency. Isn't that what this is?
Absolutely. So first of all, I would suggest meditation. And meditation, there are also a lot of misconceptions about meditation, because meditating can be everything. You can play golf or play chess, or it can be all meditating. But the point is that you really allow yourself to get connected with your deeper self. I think Eckhart Tolle said that there is this craziness in our society, that we think that we are our thoughts. We really believe that we are our thoughts, and we are our emotions. And what we really can experience in meditation is that there is a thinker, there is this inner viewer. And when you experience this state that is apart from your thoughts, then you have this connections to transcendence, and from transcendence comes this perfect divine order, and this perfect divine order that you are, your human body. If you think that there are trillions of cells, and every single cell is a human, is a living being, and there are trillions of living beings creating this entity that's me. If you just think about this uh, enormous wonder and order, you see that your thoughts are just a tiny stupid thing, and there is so much order. And if you allow to create more order, then your emotional body gets stabilized, and everything in your life gets more sorted out and more sorted out every day. And I had, for example, an interesting experience during filming. If do we have time to speak about that?
Please, yeah.
When I went to Russia, there was this woman, Sinaida Baranova, and it looks crazy, because she has quite a lot of weight, actually, and
And she's a very plump Plump
Yeah,
and juicy looking woman. Yes.
yeah. And but she says, I don't eat and I don't drink. And so I asked her, have you ever been studied? And she said, no, I never have been studied. I just visited this one doctor who works with Killian photography, with GDV.
Mm-hmm.
And I just know this here from Austria, from esoteric circles, the Killian photography. But the interesting thing was that there in Russia, they used it in a normal polyclinic, this GDV machine, to look at the energy body. They use this, for example, they look at the subtle body, and they see, for example, when in certain body parts there are problems in the energy body, you can prevent this from happening in the physical body if you harmonize your subtle energy body first. Mm-hmm. So I went there with Sinaida Baranova, and she made this test with GDV, and she had this perfectly rounded energy body. And I have been filming. I was there alone. I did sound, and I had everywhere these machines, and it was stressful because you have to look at all these lights and check that the sound is good and the camera is good and hold the energy in the room. And I was sweating all over, and so the guy there asked me to do this myself. And that there were problems all over my energy body and holes there. And I was talking with him about meditation, and then he said I should try to meditate. So I have to say I meditate now for nearly 20 years, twice a day. So I have quite a routine. So I sat there for 2 minutes, meditated, and then I did the test again. And wow, in 2 minutes, my energy body was now harmonized. And
wow.
This showed me two things. First, this GDV thing is really interesting and works, and meditation works. And
I hope to interview the inventor of the GDV machine, Dr. Kortkopf. I will work to get him on the show. It's very exciting.
Fantastic. Yeah. So I don't talk too much about this part, but what I saw, meditation works. And nowadays, this is finally also something that is coming into the mainstream.
Yes.
I mean, Google has now an own department for meditation, and all the managers there did meditation because it works. There are now a lot of studies where you see after 8 weeks of daily meditations, you already have physical changes in your brain. Mm-hmm. In the amygdala, for example, that creates fears, that where your conditions for fear, the gray matter concentration is going down, and in the left hippocampus, that is good for remembering things. It's when you compare the control group and the meditation group has 8 times higher, more gray matter concentration. So if you think about that, after 8 weeks of daily meditation, you already have physical changes in your brain. And I mean, there are dozens of studies we could do now.
What else besides meditation have you found to optimize our physiology so that we have this ability to modulate our, energy burn and calorie and so on?
I can say, just read your book. It's all in there. So go to nature, sunlight, also a beautiful interaction with people, and of course autophagy. The amounts of food we eat, it's dangerous for us. It's costing us a lot of energy. So what I also do is the 16 hours. Not eating at all, 8 hours, I can eat whatever I want. And it's so easy, when I remember in earlier times, it always was said that, you have to eat breakfast. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. You have to eat breakfast. You have to eat so much. And I never wanted to eat breakfast. I just did it because everyone says you have to eat breakfast. And it was such a release for me when I got all these scientific studies, because we have it again. When science says it's good, then you finally can relax and you can do it. Because we have forgotten to hear to our own bodies, because he said it to me all the time. I don't want to have breakfast, and now I just leave away the breakfast, and it's so easy. Of course, this is also something that differs from person to person. You know, there are morning people and there are evening people, and for evening people, it's easier to do dinner canceling. That's another thing that medicine created, that they created this picture that all humans are the same and every recipe works the same for everybody. No, we are also different. But it's for sure that we live in cycles and our cells need some time to digest and to clean up. So this is quite important. And yeah, walking to the woods, you know, in Japan, they have this
Forest bathing.
Forest bathing, Shinrin-yoku.
Yes.
And yeah, it's a therapy method there. And also science has now a lot of research about this Shinrin-yoku. But you know, you just feel it. In Vienna here, we are very lucky, and also in San Francisco, you have these beautiful woods. But in Vienna here as well, we have these large woods, and you know, it's such a wonderful thing to just go 15 minutes through the wood, and then you really feel how you get nourished. And that's also something you will talk about with Professor Gerald Pollack you have next on your show.
Yeah. This conversation is reminding me of something more fundamental, which is that we have, this is going to sound harsh, but I think it's true. We have been sort of programmed and brainwashed into thinking that we need all these complicated things, but really our optimal health is very simple.
Yeah.
Listen to your body, do what feels harmonious, slow down, find that state of inner peace, and listen deeply within yourself to what feels in alignment with you, and then life takes care of it. Let it be easy. It doesn't have to be so complicated. You know, I think when we watch the TV, the media, the advertisement is like, that makes you hungry for everything. That makes you constantly look outside. Oh, I need that hamburger. I need that, you know, we're just, that hunger is actually being reinforced or programmed into us over and over with some of the ways that the media works. But what we're talking about, meditation, 2 minutes of meditation to fill out your GDV scan, that's free. Go to the woods is free. See some sunshine is free, you know?
And it's with meditation the same. It's made so complicated. And I remember when I started meditating, I needed years to get out all these concepts, because especially for people, for rational people, it's so difficult to let go, because you always think, is this correct, what I do? And yeah, in a way, it's so simple. It's just be completely in the moment. But yeah, we have this brain illness called thoughts that we do not have under control, because of course our thoughts can be very helpful, but most of the time they just create confusion. And the meditation just helps to let go and just be. And yeah, meditating while walking in the woods is a wonderful meditation, because you really can be sure everything that's coming in is just healthy and good.
And what about Dr. Gerald Pollack? How did you come to be introduced with him? And I'm going to interview him. I'm so excited. Thank you so much for the introduction. But how did you come across him?
This was something I always say, my film is like a magnet, because I had a really long journey in making it, but the journey is going on and on and on. And it was 3 years after my film came out when Professor Pollack from the University of Washington contacted me that he heard about my film and if he could see it. And by then it was not published in the United States, and I sent him a copy and he watched it. And then he said, this is really interesting, and I think I have an explanation for you how this works. Because this was really one of the big problems that I had in talking about this, because I said, that there is good indication, but everybody said, how should this work? How should come the energy into the body, if not via food? And Professor Pollack is a bioengineer, and he works with water. And this is now really new research, and he will talk so much about it. Just to make the story short, our body water is very, very special, and it has different physical and chemical conditions than normal liquid water. And our body water is able to absorb energy from the surroundings. They even were able to make a water battery at the University of Washington, just made out of this fourth phase of water, this new state of water that is in our cells, and normal liquid water, because our body water is negatively charged. And now this was the wonderful puzzle piece that came with Professor Pollack, that my film attracted like a magnet, was that when I interviewed, for example, these Kung Fu masters in China who were talking about Bigu, they said to me, Bigu, the Chinese name for Breatharianism, Bigu, you just should practice where the chi fields are ordered and where there are a lot of negatively charged ions. And I wondered, I was there in the middle of China in the Wudang Mountains talking with the Kung Fu master, and okay, chi fields, but I thought, why in the world is he talking to me about negative
ions? Yeah.
I didn't understand it, but I just let it be. And finally, with this puzzle piece that came from Professor Pollack, I had it. Because if in your surroundings are negatively charged ions, you get nourished because really your body water is nourished by nature. And this was something that so many people told me in my research. There is this alpine yogi in my film in Austria who doesn't eat. And he said to me, when I go to Vienna, to the city, a big crowded city with 2 million people in the evening, I'll need a liter of soy milk. But when I'm in the woods, when I'm with clear water, and he was sitting there in this clear water, when I'm there, I just live with healthy air and water, nothing more. And finally, with this research from Professor Pollack, it was clear to me, that in different surroundings, it's more difficult to get this direct energy. And this is also a reason why in a lot of these clinical studies with breatharians, they underperform. Like I told the story with Hira Tanmanik, who was
and
in
Rasmuhina as well. She did that 60-minute show back in the 90s. They put her in an extremely toxic, indoor environment, no fresh air, cigarette smokes and pollution. Yeah.
Exactly. So, and I bring this example. This is like showing that sailing works when you put the boat in a swimming pool that is in a big hall where there's no wind. Because when there's no wind, you cannot demonstrate sailing. And if there isn't enough direct chi, you cannot demonstrate breatharianism properly. But all these clinical studies are done in concrete wall rooms with no direct sunlight, with air from the air condition, with positively charged ions and not negatively charged ions. So it's absolutely no wonder that they are.
Wow, this is tying something together that I mentioned in my book also, which is I just posed the question: how many of our modern health, medicine, and biology studies are done on humans or animals in these very unhealthy artificial environments with toxic lighting?
Yeah.
artificial air, no physical contact with the earth. The earth is filled with negative ions. So when we physically, earthing or grounding really helps our energy also. So we don't know anything is the point, because all of science is done in these controlled environment out of harmony with our natural ways.
In your book, you also bring this wonderful example with addiction, with the rats, that be within the Skinner box. And I bring this also in my talks always. When you look at these cages where they did this studies, it's like rat concentration camps. It's no wonder that they take drugs, because it's so horrible. And then Bruce Alexander built this rat park where it's beautiful, and they had sex and children, and suddenly they don't needed to take opium and heroin and cocaine anymore. And this is like in our world, we have these horrible conditions, and we need all these drugs to survive, food, real drugs, and all that stuff. So Bruce Alexander wrote this book where he said we have to have a whole different look on addiction and on drugs, because they actually, it's just medication for us. We do the best we can do to survive in these horrible conditions. But we have to change the conditions, then the drugs will go away on their own.
So, wow, even, in some ways, I wonder, I hope within our lifetime, we will awaken to all of these things we're talking about, where everything you're saying is just common sense to every human being. And we will look back at how archaic our society was, that we created such unhealthy environments and such toxic experiences for a human being. And we even used meditation. That's almost like a tool to survive. And in the future, everybody will be naturally in a meditative state 24/7, because that's just our natural state. We don't need to meditate to de-stress ourselves anymore, right?
And I'm sure it will happen. It's the question how long it will take. It's just part of this drama. And with my film, I got a lot of negative comments as well, with these so-called skeptics that are actually proponents of a positivistic, materialistic worldview. That they are not aware that this is a belief system. And the strongest belief systems are always the ones which are believed to be the truth, because they have science, and they think all these concepts, all these scientific concepts they are truth, and they are really fighting against all these new forms of medicine, of living. They fight against, not only against my film, but against homeopathy and faith healing and whatever. And you could start to think, and why are these bad people doing this? But it's just part of the human drama. And when you look at mankind from a higher perspective, what are 100 years? It's nothing. What is our lifespan? And there is happening so much, and I think these sometimes horrible conditions we still have in our life, they just make it so much clearer what has to be done and how society can change. And I think also the new technology really can help us to create paradise on earth, and to create again more respect for the wonder that we are. Because in our society now, we try to be better machines, and to be the perfect machines, and to work like machines, and to live like machines. But if we finally have these perfect machines who can do everything better than humans can do in this machine world, we finally can concentrate on our real human capabilities, on everything a machine can never do. A human touch, everything that has to do with the soul, creativity, and this will a wonderful world that we finally can live as real human beings and not as machines anymore.
Hmm. The flip side of that is that we have to also be conscious of our relationship, really intentional with our relationship with machine, to keep that vision alive, right? Because we are also very easily addicted to all the technology and all that screen time. And all that screen time is staying indoors in front of a screen, not getting natural light, not exposing ourselves to nature's healing powers. We could end up getting very sick and killing ourselves in that process too. There is both possibilities.
But of course, there is a utopian part to this, but also a dystopian part. I mean, we saw it, Terminator, Matrix, yeah, that's the other part. But I prefer to look the other side. And I think if we meditate, and especially if the whole humanity starts to meditate, because there are also these studies that show that we are all connected, and if a lot of people meditate together, you have a much stronger effect. And if we tap in this perfect order, and we get more order, and everything gets more harmonious and better. So I'm sure it's just a learning process, and all these wrong addictions that we have, they just make it clearer. Because of course, this is an addiction. Well, what happens with the screen time and Facebook, and everybody's experiencing that you get to it addicted, like to sugar, fat, sex, whatever. There are so many addictions, and they create in the brain more or less the same things. The dopamine and serotonin, because we are missing it in the real world, and therefore we are searching it in these addictive behaviors.
So we're really talking about society-wide, all of us coming to a new normal, a new baseline of what we call a human being. Like, what is the definition of a human being?
Yeah. And you describe it wonderfully in your book, how we can, all these different strategies, how we can shift to a new normal.
Yeah, I think that's even just basic ground zero, off of which then we have no idea what beautiful things we could create as a new society where everybody is in that state of coherence and harmony, where we live in a peaceful, tranquil, happy states 24/7. We have little glimpses of that, but that is actually our natural default state.
Yeah.
Now we're like, wow, I feel so joyful and balanced and happy. And then, it's gone. We have little glimpses of it, but that's actually a real natural normal state. Yeah. So I could talk to you for days and days and days, but let's close up this amazing conversation, and maybe we can do part 2 sometime in the future again, because I know you're always exploring next level things. I'd love to know what you're currently working on right now. What's your work like
right now? I do in Austria a lot of workshops and seminars and keynotes, and I'm also just finishing the new US version of my film, because I did an oververse version, and I'm publishing now a new DVD, and that will come out in the next weeks. I'm experimenting with perhaps a new online course where I want to talk more about all these things that we are just exploring.
You had 200 hours of footage. So there's a lot of amazing next level things that you couldn't capture in those 90 minutes of the film. Give us a little taster of some of the other things in those other 200 hours.
So these so-called superhuman capabilities, like breatharianism, is just one of them. And as I said, we all have this superhuman capability in us. We all are living on light, but it's the same with telepathy, with telekinesis, with precognition, intuition, and all that stuff. But normally it's said, when I say, I just thought about you and you're just calling me. Normally it's said, that's selective perception, and you think about that 100 times a day. Just now you remember it. It's not. There is nothing like precognition or intuition. Now, the interesting thing in my research was that there are a lot of studies that actually give scientific evidence that this actually exists, that there is precognition, there is telepathy, there is intuition. And like with breatharianism, like we all live to a certain level on light or chi or prana and that stuff, it's the same with this other capability. There are human beings who are incredibly good, and they develop these abilities to a maximum. Mm. And in my research journey, I explored also these parts. Like in China, I showed it at the Pranic Festival. They made these studies with very gifted children and Qigong masters with telepathy and telekinesis. That's just incredible when you look at this. It's like X-Men, but in real life. And it's just so far out and so strange that in our test screenings, people, it was just too much for them. We just had to edit it out because, we heard things like, now I nearly believe that there is something like breatharianism, and now you're coming with telekinesis and telepathy and that stuff. It was just too much. So everything was thrown out, and I just focused on the breatharianism part for these 90 minutes. Of course, this has also the bad side that now people just think it's all about eating and not eating. No, it's not about eating and not. That's just the tiny interesting part. And the interesting part is that we are all able to do these incredible things. And I also did this study at the Institute of Noetic Sciences in Petaluma with Dean Radin with precognition, where they show you photos and randomly, and you are connected to like a lie detector where your emotional levels are recorded. Yeah. And the interesting thing is that your body always knows which picture is coming, even if your head doesn't know. And you see this. And for me, it was clear that we all have intuition and we all have precognition, but we are not aware of it. And I want to encourage people to believe in their experience, because so often it is said, science tells us this is not true and this is not possible. No, science tells us there are good studies, but because the scientific method is mixed up with this positivistic, materialistic worldview that says only things are real where we have a scientific, positive scientific study, and only things are true that are based on materialistic grounds are true. Then all these other phenomena that are not based on matter are said to be deceptions. And
except there's the problem that quantum physics has been explored since the 20s, and now we're in 2018. It's about time that our common sense catches up to what science has been exploring for 100 years now.
I
Let's get it going, you know?
I got awarded the biggest nonsense of 2011 by the Skeptic Society in Austria. And I went there and I gave a acceptance
speech. Great.
Yeah. And in this acceptance speech, I ended with this quote of Max Planck, the founder of quantum physics, about his talk about the nature of matter. And he says, as a scientist who was researching matter all his life, he can say as much about matter, that matter as such does not exist. And behind matter, there is a conscious, intelligent mind, and this mind is the matrix of all matter. And you know, the skeptics who all live in this Newtonian physics and in this positivistic, materialistic worldview, they were shocked in a way, because, you know, it's like a heresy. It's like the Pope says God doesn't exist, just the other way around. And so, yeah, as you said, if we take this seriously, there opens up a whole new world.
Yeah, I've heard some teachers say all of these different possibilities, how important it is to remember these are side effects.
Yeah, exactly.
That there are so many side effects, some of which we know a little bit about, some of it we haven't explored yet, but these are all just side effects of something deeper, this deeper cultivation of our human possibilities. So where can we find you and follow your work?
So the film is online on lightdocumentary.com, and you find there also a lot of articles about the backstory, about the controversy, about if you go, for example, to the Indian yogi Breatharianism, because you find a lot of nonsense on the internet about these studies, and that's all wrong. And so I have, for example, an article just about Breatharianism with all the arguments of the skeptics and all the research I did and so on, and about Chas Mohin and Hiratan Manek and about the calorie myth. So if you watch the film, it's also good to do all this research or read all the research on the website, because there you also have all the links to the scientific studies. So it's very well founded. My film has a huge backstory, and if you just watch the 90 minutes of film, you know, it's just like an introduction. It's just like an introduction. There is also a blog, lightdocumentary.space, where I also write about Charles Pollack, for example. And of course, there's a Facebook group. In the beginning, there was like the film. And yeah, that's the English-speaking part of my work that I published in English. Mm. Yeah, there's a DVD, of course, as well. And if somebody wants to make a screening in the United States, just contact me, and I will be happy to cooperate and work with you together.
Thank you for doing this amazing work, blowing our minds, but also doing it from such a level-headed state, where you combine your experience with meditation and all your decades of personal experience and research together with the latest scientific evidence. You know, I think that's what we really need, because there are all of those spiritual people who have their experiences, and then there are all the scientific ones. But I think our world needs more bridge builders that can integrate all these streams of knowledge.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's also something you do with your work, because this is so important. Bring this Eastern, Western world together, esoteric and scientific. We don't need fight and classical medicine against alternative medicine. No, that there are parts where classical medicine is good, and there are parts where alternative medicine is good, and Western culture and Eastern culture, and we need to combine it, because take the best of all worlds. And
I couldn't agree with you more. So I'm going to ask you my final question, and maybe my most important one. After all these decades of exploration, since this show, at the end of the day, our show is about the next level of human possibilities, what would be your number one advice to our audience in awakening our highest human potential?
Start meditating. If you don't do it already, start meditating. Just some form, not a special technique. With meditating, I really mean that you just be. You get freed from your own thoughts and emotions, and just experience your true being, your true inner being, and then all the coherence and all the good information is coming up. There is this beautiful saying: if we are praying, we are talking to God. If we are meditating, God is talking with us. And that's the other way around. The information is the coherent, and of course you can change God with transcendence or collective unconsciousness or whatever, but the coherence, the information is coming into us without creating disorder with our thoughts. So yes, this would be my number one advice.
Wow. Thank you for that amazing, juicy interview. That was incredible. Thank you so much, Peter. So much gratitude for you. Thank you so much. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye, everybody, and thank you to Edith. That was wonderful. Thank you.
Hi, friends. Did you love that interview? If you did, please leave a review and share with all your friends so that many more people can benefit from these game-changing insights. You can also go onto our website, dredithubuntu.com, and subscribe to our newsletter, where you'll receive free trainings and next-level ninja tools that we only share on our newsletter. Together, let's turn your life into a brilliant masterpiece.